Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a entrepreneur coming out of South Carolina, Skip Wilson, here on the show. And he's going to talk to us all about advertising and building an advertising business, d- data-driven design, software, AI. And I'm really happy to have Skip on the show. So Skip, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I remember I recently reread David Ogilvy's talking about copywriting and
Yeah.
advertising moments.
Confessions of an Ad
Um,
Man, I think. Yeah, no,
yeah,
David Ogilvy's. He's one of I originally started out as a copywriter, and which is what he was. That's like what he made before he was an agency owner, he was just a freelance copywriter. And but yeah, he's in terms of how to structure headlines, 80 cents of every dollar is spent in the headline. That stuff all still very much rings true. Just as true now as it was when he wrote that book in the 60s.
yeah, I really love that. And even tech behemoths, Facebook, Google, these are all built on advertising. So talk about how you got started, how you see the industry evolving, especially with data AI now.
Yeah.
Then we'll get the conversation started.
I got started originally. I was 16 years old. I was trying to impress a girl. So I was like, I'm a writer. And then I tried to make good on that. And the only writing jobs were ad agencies and things around here. And so that's how I got started, was as doing freelance work there. And then that was right as WordPress was starting to become a thing. And the idea of someone building their own website. This is somebody who didn't know how to write HTML code, building a website was just becoming a thing. So I was asked, hey, can you do websites? And I was like, no. And then they were like, it pays $5,000, which at that time was like more money than I could have ever imagined. And so then I started doing that. I started doing websites, building those things. Eventually went to Clemson and was at Time Warner. It was pulled up to Time Warner because I was a journalism major, and that and my tech background was at Time Warner when they were building out iReport, which CNN.com/iReport was like their user generated. Basically, at that time, YouTube was becoming a thing, and everyone was like, how can I build our own YouTube? Instead of joining YouTube, it was like, how can we build our own? So that was their attempt, or I guess our attempt to build its own YouTube. And then from that over to iHeart, which was Clear Channel Radio at the time, they were launching an app. Make a long story short, then I spent the next decade plus, it was about 12 years at iHeart. I was the vice president of digital media there, and before going out on my own. And part of the main motivation for going out on my own was the increase in data, the increase in information it used to be Henry Ford. It's been attributed to several people. Probably someone who we will never know is the one that actually said it, but the whole half my advertising is working, I just don't know which half. And that shouldn't be the case anymore. There's no excuse for that anymore. And I kept having this idea of every client, every business meeting that we're ever in, we always get the same question, which is, hey, if I give you $1 million, what can I expect in return? That type of thing. But there was never a good answer for that. And that was frustrating for me because it should be like advertising and marketing are a little different. Like marketing is everything from how your brand is positioned, the way you answer the phone, the shirt you wear, all of that stuff. Advertising is like a science. Like we know what a Facebook ad cost per click should be in this category, in this geography, right? That's an objective number. And we know that a landing page should convert at this. We know if you're doing a radio campaign, that whatever. So essentially the idea was always in my head of, oh, we should just model that out. And that's ultimately what led to us forming Draft. Draft started out as a tech SaaS that was our thing, was basically creating a way to model and predict campaigns. And then eventually we had so many people just go, hey, thanks for building the plan. Can you guys just do it? We transitioned over to that, and then that's where we are today. That was a long answer, but that's where we are now. And
Yeah,
the industry is changing. Sorry.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's fascinating to see how everything originally it was like newspaper, magazine, TV, radio, and now it's like digital and it's mobile, smartphones, and now you got social media and now you have AI as well. And I really love to talk to veterans such as yourself to kick it off. What major shifts have you seen? How have you adapted to them?
Yeah, one of the bigger exciting shifts for my company, although it stinks for the industry, but it's good for us, mixed bag. But is that used 10 years ago, if there was this big reduction in force in the marketing world, where if you had a company with a CMO, you normally would have a CMO and then a team of 10 or so people underneath that person. That started getting shrinking down to where now you've got a team of one or two people that are doing the same tasks. Now the industry is almost going through another sort of version of that, where instead of having a CMO that's working for one company, you now have a CMO that's working for 3 to 5 to less than 10, usually, companies. And what that means is that same person it has to be a lot more efficient and a lot better at doing things quickly. And so that's one of the big trends I see in the industry. That's going to mean that I think there's going to be a lot of talk and conversation about the importance of branding and those types of things, which is true. And there's some truth to that. But a lot of the reason for that is because it's also a lot easier to measure those types of campaigns because you can't. So I think that's part of what's going to push a lot of the, oh, you just need to get your name out there type of conversations. Usually if an advertiser says that, that's just because I don't feel like actually tracking this. So that's one of the big trends I see coming up.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of fractional CMOs come on the show. That's the first time where you've explicitly stated like the teams get smaller. And where does data, because now it sounds like the advertising industry moves very quickly. You've got data, you've got internet, now you have AI. Where does all of these fit into the new paradigms of advertising? And because now I also read a report that like CNN, Fox News, all these everybody's going to Twitter now and they don't trust legacy. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So definitely the move towards what's nice about it is that there was maybe 2 or 3 platforms that controlled the internet. It was essentially like Google Meta and Amazon. If you're in those spots, you can do almost anything, right? And if you're good at those, that's great. One of the big things that has already started to happen and will continue is that those other platforms are going to get much more important, and it's going to grow and it's going to continue. It's going to be very difficult to be able to just have this is our Meta strategy, this is our Google strategy, and we don't need to worry about the rest, because now you need to have a LinkedIn campaign and a TikTok campaign. And instead of buying 2 or 3 TV stations, you need to have a Hulu campaign and a Amazon Prime campaign and all. So there's a lot more choices and options available now, which is funny because that was the same complaint that folks were having even just 10 years ago. But now it's that times 100, right? There's literally dozens of choices for every one solution there was a year ago. And so that's frustrating in a way for the person that has to do it. But the benefit of that is that you get a lot better first party data and a lot better feedback and information of which each platform sort of appeals for one reason or another to a different psychographic, and you get different type of person using this one than that one. And so the nice thing is that it makes everything even more trackable. And then when you take that with the different options, it also protects you, because there were plenty of businesses that were completely killed when like Facebook changed their like targeting capabilities and those types of things. It's not good to be dependent on one platform. So having multiple platforms that you can use is actually a good thing. It's just frustrating if you don't know how to make all that data talk to each other. It's good, but it definitely does. It's going to get harder for people. My brother owns a automotive shop in Atlanta, and then opened up a second location. But for him to do his ads, and keep in mind, he's got a brother in the industry, right? But he does his ad. He always did his advertising himself because it's fairly straightforward. He just needs to show up if somebody's searching for tires near him or oil change near him. And that the ability for business owners to do their own ads is about to get a lot harder because there are so many different choices.
Yeah. When we talk about it, so next we'll talk about this idea, because we'll talk about what to look for when doing this. And so this idea of you talk about how business can forecast the success of their advertising efforts before spending a dime, and you talk about this kind of draft mentality. You talk about how people can basically, it reminds me of a beta, like a soft launch where you just launch something and see what interests before actually making a product. Talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a time where you would want to do a bunch of research before running a campaign. So before you launch a campaign, you would want to have a focus group, or you would spend, and yeah, you'd spend 10 grand, 30 grand just getting who your target audience is, what resonates with them and what doesn't. And it was always like inaccurate because those places don't match the real world. And it was still a guess, right? Like you'd still have a campaign that just totally crapped the bed once it actually launched. Now you don't need to do any of that. But now it's much better to take a few $100 and run a campaign testing 5 or 6 different images, 5 or 6 different versions of the headline. And then you can see which one's doing better. It's really the best time ever. While it's going to be more frustrating to do the ads yourself, the ability to track response down to a very specific test audience and test creative has never been better. And when it comes down to predicting a campaign, so shameless plug, that's what Draft's tool does. So you can always just go to draftmediapartners.com or draftadvertising.com, reach out to us. We build the plan, give you access to the tool, and we don't charge for that because the hope is that you then say, okay, I'll just do the campaign, and then that's when we'll make money. But if you just want the plan, that's fine too. So that's one way to do it. But even if you don't do it that way, you should know if you're a dentist in Omaha, it's just a Google search away to try to figure out what your competitor is spending, what keywords they're buying, what the average cost per click is. And then that becomes your benchmark. And then another Google search to figure out what should a landing page be converting at. And so doing it that way, you can very easily come to a answer to that question of, hey, if we have a $5,000 budget, how many leads and ultimately how many appointments should we expect? That's a very objective thing. And then that becomes like the scorecard. And then everything that you do everything that you do from a paid standpoint, you're just referring back to that report card to be like, did we do better or worse than the clicks we were expecting? Did we do better or worse than the conversions? It works for traditional media too, but for most of your audience, it's going to be digital heavy, but you should know those things ahead of time. So if you're in the B2B space, you're looking at a cost per lead, probably sorry, I guess the building's on fire. I don't know if that's coming through right now. Loud sirens. But if you're in the B2B space, so your customer acquisition cost is probably going to be around $100 because you know that it's going to cost about $1 a click or so to get people to the page. It's going to convert at about 5% or so. And so it's going to cost you about $100 to get a new person into your funnel. And those are things that you can know ahead of time. So then you can decide that makes sense or it doesn't make sense, right? If you only make $75 a customer, or if it takes you 10 leads to make a sale and your sale's only $200 of profit, then it doesn't make sense because you're going to be paying $1,000 in leads to get $200 of profit. So those are things that I would encourage any company, any business owner to do beforehand. You should never go to the grocery store without a shopping list, right? And you should never do an ad campaign without knowing like what at least the average industry conversion is. And then as far as the draft mentality piece, draft mentality is just the idea that things can constantly be improved. And so when you start a campaign with those things determined ahead of time, then you can just troubleshoot it, just like troubleshooting anything. So then it's like, all right, we should be getting, say, 1,000 clicks to the page, and we're only getting 700. Okay, we have an ad problem. Either we're reaching the wrong audience or they don't care about the message. So we need to tweak the message, tweak the headlines, those things. If it's the other issue, if you're getting the people to the site, but they're not converting, then you've got a landing page issue. Or if you look and they're only spending 10 seconds on the website, you've got an audience issue because you're reaching the wrong people. It's to be, all the time, business owners run into a sort of, oh, we tried that and it didn't work. We tried Google and it didn't work. We tried this and it didn't work. The reality is there's businesses having success on every platform, on every medium. There's some business in your category that's going to have success there. It's all about figuring out which piece fell down. It's like trying to fix an engine or a motor or something, right? Like you want to figure out, okay, electricity is getting from here to here, but it's not getting from here to here. That's how you should think about an ad campaign. And the idea of it failing for a week, very possible because you're making a bunch of guesses. The idea of it failing for a couple of months, that shouldn't happen as long as you're tweaking and changing it along the way.
Yeah, really fascinating. I know we have around 5 more minutes left. And what's interesting
Yeah.
is with your decades of experience, what are some of the most valuable lessons you learned? And how do these lessons apply in today's, excuse me, digital first world?
So first principles are still first principles. I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, because it can be easy to become over reliant on things like targeting capabilities or those types of things. Ultimately, all platforms come down to sending some sort of specific message to a specific audience to get them to do something specific. Never launch a campaign unless you know the answer to those questions. Who am I trying to talk to specifically? What am I trying to say to get them to do this specific thing? Whether it's a Super Bowl ad or whether it's a boosted Facebook post, you need to know those things ahead of time. And that should drive how you track things. That if you're trying to get phone calls, set it up in Google as a phone call campaign. You should begin with those things. That's, I would say, is the number one piece of advice I have is don't expect an ad to sell for you. If you're an accountant and you're running a schedule a free consultation ad, it's probably not going to work, because that's a lot of selling to try to squeeze into a banner ad. That's only going to work if somebody was already thinking about an accountant that morning, right? It's much easier to get them from doing something else to your site. And then your site is to get them from considering maybe I need this to now requesting this free piece of information. It all needs to be a specific message to a specific audience for one result.
How can people find you and follow you and check out your work and reach out to work with you?
The best place is, like, I'm a curmudgeon as far as like social media and stuff personally, but so best place to do that is really draftmediapartners.com. Reach out. If you email info@draftmediapartners.com, I'm one of the folks that'll get that. And so, yeah, reach out, ask questions. I'm a marketing nerd, so I like answering stuff.
Yeah, I really love that. And for all the audience, thanks Skip for coming on, and give his social like and follow and check out his work, reach out and work with him. And thanks so much for coming on.